A few years ago, a spiritual visitation in my family completely changed the way that I think about death, ancestral memory, and what lingers between the worlds. What if the boundary between the living and the dead is thinner than we think? And what if all we carry in life doesn't vanish when we cross the veil? Let's explore this together, mystic travelers. With this light, our circle opens, a circle rooted in earth, in memory, and in the quiet places where the worlds touch. The lantern is lit. Let's begin this journey together. Last month, we explored the Tibetan Book of the Dead and the Bardo's, a liminal space between death and rebirth. In this month's ritual, we're exploring thin places, ancestral visitations, and the soul patterns we inherit without even realizing it. There's something strange about me. I very rarely dream of people I know. Even when I was married for 15 years, I dreamed of my then husband maybe half a dozen times. So when my grandma started showing up in my dreams every night after she passed away, not only did it stick out to me, but it also happened in such a way that it gives me goosebumps to this very day. The day she passed, I got a powerful sign witnessed by others, but I'll get into that in the Curio shelf episode in a couple of weeks. But for this encounter, we take a step back. You see, my family comes from a rough background, deep Appalachia, generations of trauma and of abuse and of resilience and overcoming impossible obstacles. I always looked up to my aunts and my grandmother because they were women who had gone through the unthinkable and had arisen as powerful, strong, and compassionate women. But in her last years, my grandmother was so tired. I went to see her as often as I could, but the lines etched across her face, well, they showed a lifetime of trauma and overworking that had worn her down. The dreams started right away after she passed. In the first one, we were in her house, the house she had been in for as long as I can remember. A tiny ranch-style home that had been the hub of family gatherings for years, but had grown quiet in the last decade or so. In the dream, I found myself standing in the kitchen, and there she was, next to the island. The walls were lined with decorative metal jello molds, just as they had been all of my life. She looked like she had the last time I had seen her. She was in her 80s, frail and thin with short whitish gray hair. But instead of her warm smile, she looked shocked and honestly panicked. She couldn't even speak when I tried talking to her. She was looking around in a daze, confused and maybe a little scared. Meanwhile, as I would find out a few years later, my aunt was having an intense visitation experience of her own, which I'll get to in a moment. So over the next few months, I dreamed of my grandmother every single night. For the first week or so, she still seemed very disoriented. But then I started noticing something. She started looking a little younger. She started talking a little. And then she started smiling and laughing and talking a lot more. And one night as I slept, she appeared in my dream as usual. And she looked so young and vibrant, like this lovely picture I have of her from when she was around 16 years old or so. She gave me this big hug and she told me how much she loved me. And that was it. I've never dreamt of her again, not to this day, almost 10 years later. I didn't really talk to my aunts much, although when we did get together, we'd have so much fun. So a few years later, I'm talking to my aunt, and she tells me that when her mother, my grandma, passed away, that she appeared to her, sitting on the end of my aunt's bed. She looked so sad, and she said, "It doesn't get any better, does it?" before vanishing. A year later, my grandpa passed. He and my grandma had been divorced for many years, but he still loved her. I remember talking to him a lot about spiritual ideas during his life because I've always been very spiritual. And he would always say that he knew he was going to hell when he died. Just a matter of fact, not angry about it, not using it as an excuse to be a bad person. He felt that he had been a bad person in his life. And it is true that he was raised in a very tough situation and they weren't the best parents. But when they learned better, they did better. And they became wonderful grandparents and great grandparents, and their children loved them deeply despite the difficulties in the past. So when he passed, he too appeared to my aunt, and he said to her, "Don't worry about your mom. She's okay. I'm taking care of her." So why did this all happen the way it did? And what does it indicate for what comes after? If you watched last month's episode on the Bardos, some of this may seem like it's taking a familiar shape. You see, my grandma was open-hearted, accepting, and kind, but I think that maybe she thought that she just had to wait out life so that when she went to heaven, it'd all be okay. But when she passed, she found that all the things she didn't deal with in life carried over. Hence her shocked expression in my dream and her resigned comment to my aunt. However, my grandpa had dealt with his demons in life, and it was almost like that had helped him work through his trauma quickly upon the death waking. That sentence my grandmother said, "It doesn't get any better, does it?" It really shook me for a long time because to me it meant that her pain did not vanish instantly on the other side and that there was still healing to do, still unraveling, still remembering. Around that time, I read Rumi's poem, The Dream That Must Be Interpreted. The poem starts like this: "This place is a dream. Only a sleeper considers it real. Then death comes like dawn, and you wake up laughing at what you thought was your grief. But there's a difference with this dream. Everything cruel and unconscious done in the illusion of the present world, all that does not fade away upon the death waking. It stays, and it must be interpreted. All the mean laughing, all the quick wanting, they change into powerful wolves that you must face. The retaliation that sometimes comes here, the swift payback hit, it's just a boy's game to what the other will be." Rumi was clear that the unconscious cruelties and unfinished patterns of this world do not disappear when you awaken beyond the veil, but that what we do not face here becomes louder, much louder there, like intense visions arising from the mind's projection in the bardos of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Whatever is trapped in your mind or unconscious becomes amplified, not as a punishment, but as an invitation to finally heal what we've carried too long. As with all my stories and experiences, whether you believe this is literally true or not, the essence of the questions still remain, and their importance affects us even here and now. How does generational trauma and ancestral echoes shape the way we heal in this life? And does that carry over for one soul from life to life in the same way it carries from generation to generation in families? Before we dive deeper, if you're new here or if you'd like to understand how the Mystic's Lantern 4-part ritual works each month, there's an orientation video on the channel that you can watch anytime. Across the world and across time, cultures have believed that consciousness lingers after death. As mentioned before, in Tibetan Buddhism, there's a 49-day transition period between death and rebirth, where a soul encounters instant manifestation and projection of thought. In Jewish tradition, the dead are buried as soon as possible to allow the soul to start its spiritual journey. Since the time between death and burial is thought to be very confusing to the soul that has passed. And while sitting Shiva, or the 7-day mourning period after a soul has passed on, mirrors are covered so that mourners are not pulled into self-focus or vanity, but rather into reflection and remembrance. Some older Jewish traditions believe that a mirror could confuse a spirit, or that the spirit of the recently departed could even be seen by the living in an uncovered mirror. Across cultures, death is not a wall, it is a doorway, and beyond that doorway are many, many rooms. Here is the truth that this month's ritual is asking us to consider. We inherit more than eye color and family stories. We also inherit emotional patterns, invisible subconscious teachings. We even inherit our ancestors' unfinished business. Our lived patterns are amplified echoes of what our ancestors could not resolve in their lives. But healing does not belong only to the dead. In fact, Rumi makes it clear that healing here, where we have time to reflect without the instant manifestation of our deepest wounds and towering monsters, is one of the most important things we can do for ourselves and our ancestors and our descendants. When we face our own mirror honestly, bravely, and compassionately, we heal backward through the lineage and forward into the generations not yet born. Next Tuesday, in our practical magic ritual, we will expand upon this ancestral connection through my family's version of a ritual that has been done for at least the last 400 years, and perhaps longer. If you wish to participate, you'll only need a plate, a candle, and a quiet place to listen, and perhaps something that reminds you of a loved one that has transitioned. If this story stirred something in you, I'd love to hear it in the comments. I'd love to hear your family stories. And if you want to walk this whole arc with me, from illumination to ritual to sacred object to inner journey, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss next week or any of the other weeks. The circle remains open. And I'll see you next time. Mystic Travel.